This video is going to be a film study look at what the Baltimore Ravens defense was able to accomplish in their Christmas Day win over the Houston Texans in Week 17, holding the Texans to 10 first downs overall, 211 yards of offense, and just 3.9 yards per play. It really looked like a Ravens 2023 defense. The same formula existed. Stop or slow down the run significantly, and in this case, Houston only generated 58 rushing yards. Joe Mixon was really not much of a factor. And then present the quarterback with so much variability in coverages and blitzes that it takes away his decisiveness at times. Now, look, C.J. Stroud missed some throws, number one, and there was also plays out there to be made by a couple of the receivers. I will show you some of those instances here. The Ravens' defense was just playing incredibly fast and physical and attached to receivers in coverage, whether it was man. They did play a lot of man, particularly in the first half. Generally going to focus this film study video on the first 2.5 to 3 quarters. Ton of guys having an impact, and that's the reason why I chose this picture that I was able to find on the internet. They had 5 sacks overall, split evenly. Kyle Van Noy now has 11. I think Odafe Oweh has 9. Very similar look and feel watching the film to the 2023 Ravens defense that we all remembered and that we all hoped would be here in the first 6, 8, 10 weeks of the season. It didn't occur, but since Week 11, since that loss to the Steelers on the road, the Ravens are allowing, if I did my math right, 176.5 passing yards per game while still maintaining their effectiveness against the run. If they're able to do that on defense and minimize penalties, by the way, we only had 3 penalties called on us total against the Texans. This is going to be a very difficult team to deal with in the playoffs, no matter where a game occurs. We'll go through the film here by possession, and I'll break down particular plays from each possession. This is the first one. It's a 12 personnel F counter play, and Roquan Smith makes a great read here, number one. Number two, Kyle Van Noy is setting the block inside, the initial block from the left guard who's pulling, and there's just nowhere for Joe Mixon to go. It ends up being no gain on the play. Additional to that, Malik Harrison is a part of the fit. So him and Roquan Smith are basically fitting this together. They're almost shoulder to shoulder, which is a little bit too tight for the way you draw it up, but it works out perfectly. Well, another thing to mention from this play, because we get a great angle view of it from the All-22, is one of the things the Ravens are doing with Kyle Hamilton and Marlon Humphrey is when they end up on the same side, there's this natural kind of layering of their skill sets often. So we're talking about Humphrey and Hamilton here. It doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen, 2/3 of the time. In fact, it's probably less than 30% of the time where they end up on the same side, and they almost seem to be connected and layering their alignment pre-snap for whatever reason, probably because Kyle Hamilton is so damn good in the box as a run defender, number one, and number two, Marlon Humphrey has what skills does he not have? He has outside corner skills, he has slot nickel DB skills, he can play safety, and in fact, 2 of the coverage snaps that I'll show you in this video, he is dropping to half-field safety. Here's Roquan on the fit. You're going to get the guard pull and try to kick out Van Noy. And then additional to that, this tight end, the H-back, F, whatever you want to call him, is going to pull and wrap. And because Roquan fits this up, we've got requisite numbers to stop the play. And in this case, hold Mixon to no gain. To be able to stop the run, slow it down even, from against a 12 personnel grouping with your nickel-based defense, I think is pretty remarkable. This is actually a 2nd and 10, the very next play. I have it listed as 2nd and 8. And it's 11 personnel this time against our nickel defense again. And there's no inside linebacker presence on this play, meaning no inside linebacker helps stop Joe Mixon. It actually ends up going for a 2 or perhaps 3-yard gain. It's all Kyle Van Noy and Travis Jones and then Justin Madubuike. I will use a phrase called scoop here that I've talked about in other videos. It's a backside terminology, at least the way that I was taught the game. So we're going to talk about Justin Madubuike. Look, you've never been able to scoop him, even dating back to 2021. So let's talk about where the run goes. It's going to go here to the weak side, to the boundary. Van Noy is going to set this inside. Travis Jones is also going to compress it. So those 2 guys really handle it on the front side. But a key element here when there's no inside linebacker presence, meaning no inside linebacker shows up at the point of attack, is you can't get scooped on the backside. And Justin Madubuike just never has. He's just never been a guy that you can scoop with lateral movement. So that means the tackle take him over from the guard. And because of Madubuike's presence in that gap between the guard and the tackle. The gaps move, obviously, post-snap. This tackle is trying to take him over. So he's trying to get to this side and seal off Matabike. Theoretically, if he was able to do that, Mixon could kind of hit this downhill some, since Matabike, theoretically, in this situation, would end up on the other side. He's never been scooped. Dating back to 2021, he's just a guy you can't do that to. Another way to get it accomplished would be to pin down with someone who has leverage and then pull as a pin pull scheme. We did that last week in our win against the Steelers for Daniel Falele on 2 zone run concepts. The Texans didn't attempt it one time. They're just not able to scoop that guy at all. Van Noy is pressuring the front side tackle, meaning he's forcing that tackle to make a decision. Van Noy may go to the inside, or Van Noy may stay outside and set everything, wall it, force it, whatever you want to call it. They are trying to crack the strong safety to the boundary, in this case, Orr'S, which is commonly used by a single receiver to the boundary. It's a gain of 2 yards, with the first 2 plays being a great example of the versatility of the defense, in my opinion. Stopping the run, and the first play, it's Roquan and Malik Harrison and Van Noy setting it inside. And the very next play, Roquan and Chris Board can't get there at all, and we still stop the run concept into the boundary with no inside linebacker presence at the point of attack. This Ravens defense, when I say it looked like one from 2023, I mean it in that regard, is that we can get things done in a multitude of ways. It's not all formulaic. The very next play, unfortunately, happens to be a conversion on a 3rd and 8. It's going to be Nico Collins on a slant against Nate Wiggins. Now, we actually go to the same coverage look a little later. You can almost see this pattern where what the Ravens were running early, we actually ran again late. Van Noy is supposed to be dropping out underneath of the slant to try to help out with Nico Collins. You can see the space that's afforded to him by Nate Wiggins, who's playing an off coverage. Stroud quickly in the window. Van Noy kind of folds a little bit too far into the right hash, if you ask me. And it allows, and one thing to talk about is how often we use mug looks on 3rd down, and it's served us well in the last 3 years, in fact, since Mike McDonald showed up in 2022. But one weakness of it is you, as a second level dropper, whoever's dropping, in this case it's Van Noy, there's a lot of space for you to recover, to get back into an actual pass drop. There was no one in that space. It's a void there because Van Noy is A, on the line of scrimmage, and B, not dropping, not turning and looking at Collins and getting in the window, essentially getting underneath of it. Kind of ominous there on the first possession, and then we make things right thereafter. 2 plays later, 2nd and 5, 11 personnel bunch, and this is handled beautifully. A play-action boot concept whereby you have a motion, I think it's Hutchinson, and then the second man through is the tight end in the hide concept. That's the tight end here, following Hutchinson post-snap. You can't have 2 guys in motion at the snap nor before it, but post-snap, he goes through the same path as Hutchinson, and we're actually in a cover 2. So because we're in a cover 2, Brandon Stephens is able to sit in the flats. Now, it looks a little different as far as calling it a cover 2 because of the reaction of our players to the run threat. These guys at the second level, if it were not a run play, they would be, located presumably somewhere in these 3 areas here, and it would actually have more of a cover 2 look umbrella with 4 or 5 pass droppers underneath at the second level and 2 safeties deep. It's a great job by Brandon Stephens of finishing the tackle out in the flats, and also a really nice job of Marlon Humphrey getting in the window of the over concept by, I believe it's Mechie from the other side. I really had trouble with these jerseys for the Texans. Ends up being 1 yard gain on the play when on the snap I thought, okay, this looks like there's an opportunity for him to get the ball out on the edge and or C.J. Stroud to scramble and get some yards. So that's the route from our left-hand side that Marlon Humphrey's going to get underneath of. And I'll slow it down a little bit so you can see he doesn't worry about the flat route. Why? Because he knows it's cover 2. He knows that Brandon Stephens is going to be able to handle that and always pinned down a little bit by Nico Collins. Stroud's getting rid of the ball quickly, perhaps a little bit too quick, but he understands what the coverage is. I think at the time he throws the ball, very balanced defensive coverage choices, if you ask me, by Zach Orr. Kind of indicative or illustrative of the defense that we've become since week 11. Less risky defensive coverage calls, in my opinion. Keeping things in front. Again, for the 3rd time, when I when I compare it to the 2023 Ravens defense, that's intentional because it's this safer style of blitzing, still trying to get pressure, but doing so in a safe manner that allows us to make tackles in front. It'll be some quarterback's job in the playoffs to pick us apart slowly and not allow us to get beat deep, which I don't think is what Zach Orr and the guys on the defensive staff are going to allow to happen. We're not lined up here, and Van Noy just does what he does since coming to Baltimore. I remember earlier in the season when he had 6 sacks, I think, in the first 5 games, or maybe it was 4 games. I recall going back and looking at his previous 22 regular season games, and it was a really insane number of sacks that he had produced. At this point, I'd like to go back and look at last year's film or last year's stats from 2023 combined with this year's stats, and his last 5 games of 2022 with, I believe, the Chargers, where he had 5 sacks in the last 5 weeks of the regular season. We're not lined up here at all, but because we have isolated the center, meaning Travis Jones is lined up in a manner that the center's going to have to deal with him, and post-snap, Travis Jones steps to the guard. So we've occupied 2 players with only one guy, Travis Jones, and that creates this 2-on-2 here. Van Noy goes underneath. Really his patented move at this point. Closing ground, getting a sack. Ridiculous, if you ask me, production over the course of 2 years with the Ravens. That was on a 3rd and 4 to get an early stop. Moving forward, second possession, 11 personnel flex after the motion. So what I mean is the wide receiver is going to motion out to the right, so you got a 2-by-2 set. And we're essentially playing a 2-high shell, and it's a great reaction by Ar'Darius Washington. So it's a little bit of an in cut by, I think, the tight end. Also, Malik Harrison, a little underrated in zone in a couple of snaps in this game, staying inside leverage, not getting too much width, such that the tight end could sneak underneath and give C.J. Stroud a bigger window. People talked about C.J. Stroud missing throws in the middle of the field. There were a couple, don't get me wrong, but there was also instances of our inside linebackers at the second level sitting in a window and making that window shorter or more compressed than perhaps C.J. Stroud would like to have had. Additional to that, Ar'Darius Washington. He doesn't just show up where he needs to be. He shows up at the exact precise moment that we need him to be here. Same play from the end zone angle. And so Harrison, you won't necessarily see the route, but he's just sitting inside of that route such that it gives Stroud less of a window to throw to. And Ar'Darius shows up not just in the right place, but at the right time, which I think is a key element. He's quick and decisive with his reads. Very different, obviously, from the other guys that we had at left safety earlier in 2024. He's just putting up good play after good play, no matter what his pre-snap alignment is and no matter what his post-snap responsibility is. You're going to see this coverage twice in this video. This is going to 2nd and 10 on the same possession, second possession, and you're going to get motion into a flex set. Similar, except now it's inverted, so the tight end is out wide and the receiver's in the slot. Usually a dead giveaway that it's pass because you don't oftentimes see teams running with a 5-man surface and no tight end to help out at all. But this is a Tampa 2, and it certainly didn't look like one pre-snap. Pull this back a little bit. Watch how we get to this. So Harrison's going to walk up to the edge, create a 5-1 look with Roquan as the lone inside linebacker. And so you've got this blitz of Roquan, which I'm a fan of. Harrison dropping out. I think it's Ojabo dropping out. And then Hamilton is the guy who's going to become the middle of the field defender. Basically, you call it running the pipe between the hashes. And he would deal with any verticals. It's very clear that you've got a 2-high safety look. The difference is this is Marlon Humphrey. Brandon Stevens, right side corner. Nate Wiggins, left side corner. We have created, if you ask me, a Tampa 2. Done so in a somewhat anomalous way. Again, looks straight out of the Baltimore Ravens 2023 playbook, if you ask me. Same play from the end zone angle. So that's the 3 linebackers that are connected. 2 of them, or one of them is an absolute outside linebacker, Ojabo. Harrison, hybrid guy. Roquan, inside linebacker. We bring him on a blitz. It was a pretty good job most of the night by the Texans running backs in pass pro. And you can see we've dropped out Harrison, dropped out Ojabo, who has opened up, in fact, to kind of get eyes on the receiver. Ball thrown over the top of the wide receiver. Stroud didn't. It's like he couldn't have touch and velocity at the same time in this game and maintain accuracy. It seemed like you either got one or the other on a lot of his throws, particularly early. So, very next play, 3rd and 10, spread jokers. And we're in dime personnel because we got Brandon Stevens on the field along with Roquan Smith. It's man coverage with an add-on. So Roquan and Brandon Stevens appear to be adding on as potential blitzers because their man stayed in to pass protect. The Texans have done this in pretty much every game that we've played against them. Week 1 last year, the divisional playoff round win, and this regular season win on Christmas Day, whereby they bring a tight end in out of 11 personnel, and I call it jokers, essentially offer themselves 7-man protection scheme because they're anticipating a blitz with man coverage. The man coverage that I'm referring to is Brandon Stevens and Roquan Smith on the running back and the tight end. And Brandon Stevens is the guy who loses the tight end because the tight end initially stayed into block. Clearly, there is a lot of space there for the tight end if he's able to get that ball in his hands. C.J. Stroud apparently threw it a little bit high, but I think he was connected. I think he was, dislodged a little bit by an offensive lineman that Van Noy was engaging, being pushed back into his lap. And you can see after the snap that it is Roquan Smith is looking at Brandon Stevens, like telling him, hey, that's your guy, and you can't leave him open. But nonetheless, we did get a stop on the second possession. The offense was clearly rolling early. I think we jumped out to a 10-point lead. We'll move forward here to the third possession. 1st and 10 out of 12 personnel for the Texans. So 2 tight ends up to the top side, 2 receivers to the downside. I call it twin wing, whether those tight ends are inverted like they are here or in a traditional tight end wing alignment. So Humphrey's going to go on a blitz. He gets held, by the way. They missed the connection with Mixon out in the flats. I think Malik Harrison should probably push the flats here. It's a play action concept. So on the snap, he's coming downhill a little bit. Wrong read. And then he's turning to get back into a drop. I'm not exactly sure what the coverage is here. We're releasing an inside receiver, dropping back. It almost looks like this should be a hybrid, like 4 under, 2 deep coverage. But I can't quite figure it out, to be honest with you, because of the play action nature of it. Play action will oftentimes break the coverage look, so you don't get a clean glance at it. Roquan is way faster to recognizing play action than Malik Harrison is. Corner appears to be carrying 1 up to the top side. I think that's Nate Wiggins. Pass out into the flats. Fortunately for us, ends up going incomplete. Tavius Robinson kind of almost gives away the blitz a little bit, some kind of call or communication. Maybe it was on initial cadence by C.J. Stroud, but he stands up, he kind of stems to the inside. Marlon on the blitz off the edge, clearly being held by one of the tight ends, and Stroud unable to connect with Mixon. Probably the 3rd or 4th throw in the first half that really looked unusual from a Stroud standpoint. It doesn't surprise me that there's now reports out there that he's suffering or dealing with some type of injury. Still the same possession, 3rd and 8, second and 8, on the third possession, and they go ace gun. Wide receiver initially stays in to pass pro here, and then he'll slide out into the flats. Marlon kind of covers it up. A little bit of a false sense of security for Marlon because he'll give up a completion a little bit later on here in the game. A lot of time for Stroud to throw here with what looks to be a 5-man rush and man free. Ardarius Washington is on the tight end, and Stroud just trusts the guy. He throws it up to Schultz. Schultz is able to catch it on Ardarius. I still like Ardarius as a competitor out there, in my opinion. Ojabo's dropping out and kind of the low hole dropper, but he's not between the hashes. Roquan is an add-on blitzer here. So interesting coverage. We've been blitzing Roquan more lately. I think I've talked about that multiple times in film study videos. As an aside, I mean, they're not wrong when they say that Joe Mixon does a nice job in pass pro. I mean, here he is waiting for Roquan to commit, and then those guys colliding. Now, Roquan did win one of the matchups later on. This is a really nice catch by Dalton Schultz up top against Ardarius. I still like Ardarius's chances in coverage against guys like that, even though it's obviously an athletic mismatch from a size, I should say a size and frame mismatch, not an athletic mismatch. Third possession, still 2nd and 10. Same exact formation. The Texans go through a lot to try to get the Ravens to give away their coverage, and we're just not moving. Clearly, it's going to be some type of zone. The receiver who is in the slot ends up down into the flats. Marlon, I think he gets a forced fumble here. I'm not sure. This is sharp by Stroud. You've got dual chips and then releases with the receiver and the tight end out into the flats. Marlon maybe could get a little bit more width. He's heavy on the quarterback. Once he gets there, it's almost like I can almost see a couple of more forced fumbles occurring. Marlon is playing so well. That magic touch is almost there. Maybe he didn't get credit for a forced fumble there. It is a it is a gain of 8 that creates a 3rd and 2. And this was one of the best moments of the game for me defensively. So 3rd and 2, 11 personnel. They go, not only do they go flex, but they motion a receiver all the way across. Brandon Stephens goes with him. So interesting for the Ravens that we're using Brandon Stephens as an outside corner and a dime linebacker. I don't know of another player in the NFL who does that. Lines up at outside corner on some snaps and plays dime linebacker, essentially a coverage linebacker. 3rd and 2, and they go with RPO. So Hamilton and Brandon Stephens have locked their guys up. C.J. Stroud trying to decide who to throw the football to because you've got dual in-breaking routes, dual slants, if you will, here, and they're both covered up. Additional to that, Chris Board played quite well the other day. So he's going with the running back. There's a huge lane. When you get the end zone angle, you'll see it. And then he recognizes the play concept, so he kind of sifts back underneath of this route, and C.J. Stroud has nowhere to go with the football. Oh, wait. I don't know about you, but live time, I was worried. I was like, okay, I hope that we can finish this one off because there's been some times where Oweh has guys in his grasp or close to it and is unable to finish the play. In this case, he did, and I think it's his 9th sack of the year. Board at inside linebacker almost is even looking at the tight end. So check out how they get this done. They're zoning everything to this side. So theoretically, this could be a give to the running back to try to get the first down on a 3rd and 2. The left tackle is on a lock call, whatever people want to call it, terminology you want to use, with the outside linebacker. So they've isolated Chris Board as the read. And Board initially went with the running back a little bit, but both of the coverage guys off screen to our left, Hamilton, who you're kind of catching a little bit of here on the tight end, and then Brandon Stephens on the wide receiver down to the bottom side of the screen from the All-22, the left side here from the end zone. This was a statement, if you ask me, not just to stop on the first 3 possessions, but this particular play. It's unique. It's obviously seen more at this stage of football than 3 or 4 years ago. I remember the Ravens running a lot of RPOs to their left with a right-handed quarterback in Lamar in like 2020 and 2021. For us to be that prepared for that moment, I thought that was a good sign. Number one. Number two, hopefully from the video and the plays that I'm illustrating here, you can see there's multiple guys involved in playing what I would consider to be team defense. Really very much reminds me of a very connected, almost seamless transition of defense for like a high-level NBA basketball team, a championship-level defense that's connected and can pass guys off, whether it's man or zone or a man-zone hybrid. That's kind of what that play reminded me of. Next possession, and we've given away our coverage by going cowboy. See Nate Wiggins following the receiver across the screen. It's 11 personnel, and we're going to go man. Marlon is funneling his route from outside leverage to Ardarius Washington because we're playing man to the backside here. And unfortunately, Marlon is a little bit slow. Let me rephrase that. In order for him to help defend this third in-breaking route against Tre'Davious White, Marlon would need to be quicker in making his determination to pass that route off. I have no idea what the call is. I have no idea how the Ravens determine it, what depth we use to determine, hey, I'm going to pass that off and then settle, fall off, whatever you want to call it. Marlon actually does so, but in terms of trying to defend this route, it's a nice throw by Stroud, by the way. Marlon's too late to do so. Tre'Davious White obviously beat over the middle. I'm not saying it's Marlon Humphrey's fault. I'm saying I have no idea what their depth is, determination for when he should do so. And in order to stop that particular in-breaking route, which is the third one on that concept from trips, Marlon would have had to make that decision a little bit earlier. Same possession, moving forward, a fifth possession. And this is really nice how Roquan and Ardarius handle this. You can see a lot of communication between Ardarius and Kyle Hamilton. It's a 2nd and 2, ends up being an incomplete pass. And they've put one of the wide receivers, Hutchinson, in the backfield and motioned him out. Now, yes, Nico Collins could catch this football, and when you get the end zone angle, that'll be confirmed for you. There's a little bit of nuance here that I hopefully can give you some awareness of. So the wide receiver, Hutchinson, is in the backfield, and they're motioning him out into the flats. Additional to that, you have a slant here. When I say that the Ravens defense looked prepared, this would be an example of it if I'm able to get this point across for you. So one simple way to handle this is a coverage that the Ravens have used really since 2022, whereby the boundary side safety reads the running back, and so does the inside linebacker. And on that particular response, the boundary side safety takes the running back, and then that allows the inside linebacker to do any number of things depending on the call. Could be a blitzer, could settle in the middle of the field, could, if you, in the case of Nico Collins, have a big, strong X wide receiver, could sit here in the slant window and help out. Roquan does a little bit of the last two. So he kind of or the first one and the third option, he pushes to the flats, but watch his head turn. And if the video is stuttering, my apologies. I've got a different video player that I'm using, and I feel like it offers opportunities to do stuff like this where you can see Roquan's helmet turn. He's not going with the receiver. He's getting in the slant window, but he's hedging this way long enough. He's hedging that way just enough initially to allow Stroud to think he might be pushing to the wide receiver in the flats. It's not his job. Ardarius is doing that. And then Roquan kind of peels back underneath of the slant, or at least tries to. And that, once again, creates a little bit of less of a window for Stroud to get this through. Essentially, if Roquan were not there, for whatever reason, if Roquan pushed the flats violently parallel to the line of scrimmage, the window for this play is going to be a lot more easily converted by the Texans between Stroud and Nico Collins. Hopefully I explain that in a way that makes sense. It's a little bit of a nuance, I guess. It's not too complicated. Hutchinson is the wide receiver who's in the backfield. And you can see that Roquan has opened his eyes or opened his hips a little bit and opened his helmet, his face mask, to look out to that side and then settles underneath of it. You can kind of catch his feet right here. It's a 2nd and 2. Again, the throw does hit Nico Collins, so you could catch the football. I'm just offering to you that we're able to influence the play a little bit here and not give Stroud this window here to put the ball in, essentially make him throw it further in that direction than Nico Collins probably wanted him to. I was glad to see us hold him down. In my opinion, it certainly could have been caught, but I think we deserve some credit for making the window smaller in this instance. Very next play, 3rd and 2, we're going to go man, and it's a great job of Kyle Hamilton. He's going to play this from like 7 yards depth, maybe 8 yards depth against the tight end. Brandon Stevens is running underneath with Robert Woods across from bottom to top on our screen. Marlon Humphrey is taking the little shake route and Marlon's got this unbelievable awareness, and I don't think I can call it a gambler, and I don't think anyone else should either, but he's in man here, but he sees that the ball is thrown. He's just a very intelligent football player. I think his understanding of football is at an incredibly high level in terms of coverage and down and distance and situation. C.J. Stroud's getting rid of the ball quick, unfortunately for us, but I think Marlon knows it right here. I think he sees the football thrown, which is crazy because he's in man and he shouldn't be looking back there, but he is. Kyle Hamilton responding to the tight end. The ball ends up being thrown a little bit too far out. But once again, I think it's because Kyle Hamilton is there and C.J. Stroud sees it that Hamilton's going to be able to recover. So this is not good. Hamilton's going to be able to cover the tight end, so it's not going to be an easy completion. And Stroud's got to throw the ball further towards the sideline than he probably would have liked in order to get the completion on a 3rd and 2. Same play from the end zone angle, and you can just kind of see what Stroud is looking at, number one. Number two, you get this real layering of the inside linebacker blitzes. I think that Roquan goes first, and then I believe that Board goes second, ends up being the second guy through on a little bit wider angle. And then additional to that, Van Noy, whose helmet you can barely see here, is dropping in the slant window. I think it's Collins off screen to our right from this angle, but you can see he's not really, even though we gave it up earlier, we gave up that play earlier, he's still not necessarily looking at it. In any case, you can see the throw is too wide for the tight end, and on the 5th possession, we're able to get another stop. Opening possession of the 3rd quarter, 1st and 10. This is going to be, at this point, how many guys that we have are playing well, doing their job on a play-by-play basis is remarkable. It's a very consistent group. But you've got some superstar guys doing superstar things, basically Marlon Humphrey, Kyle Van Noy, Kyle Hamilton. And in this case, it's a Tampa 2, the same coverage I showed you earlier, in fact, and Hamilton's making a diving interception. If you don't recall, it's 2 guys dropping out, Board and Van Noy, and then Roquan as the 4th blitzer. I'm all for it. I think I called for it maybe around week 4 or week 5. I'd like to see him used as a blitzer a little bit more. And so here we are. A couple of good things to say about this. Well, besides ridiculous play by Kyle Hamilton. But you can see the Tampa 2 nature of it here and here. That is Marlon. So Marlon is not being deployed as a safety pre-snap. But in these 2 instances of this Tampa 2 post-snap, he is, in fact, playing half-field safety. Once C.J. Stroud kind of breaks contain, Roquan actually won this route, flushed him out of the pocket, won this snap against the running back, flushed Stroud out of the pocket. Since Van Noy's at OLB, used to contain, used to rushing the quarterback, he comes downhill immediately to try to not allow Stroud that escape path. Ball was thrown too soft, obviously. Hamilton, I think it's his first interception of the year. I could be wrong. His stats in the aggregate, in totality, I should say, are pretty remarkable. Same setup as earlier on the Tampa 2 that I talked about with the 3 linebackers. The only difference is Malik Harrison's not on the field. It's Chris Board. So Chris Board and Malik Harrison were being used interchangeably as that hybrid inside linebacker / outside linebacker. You can see Roquan is the guy pressuring Stroud. Van Noy comes up late. Soft throw by Stroud. Really no chance to get that in there. It's a little shocking to me that he threw this. To me, it illustrates that he didn't pick the look up. I understand he's trying to make a play, but it's the first possession of the 3rd quarter. It is 17-2 at this point, and their offense has really gotten nothing done. I think they had 125 yards in the first half. But if he knew the look here for Hamilton, if he understood that it was a Tampa 2, you just don't throw this football around Kyle Hamilton anywhere in the middle of the field, particularly if you're fading to your right like he was. Hopefully, I said that in a way that makes sense. I look at C.J. Stroud as not just a very talented player, but cerebral, intelligent, and prepared. And so, in my opinion, this is my evaluation of the play. I think that we got him here, meaning that even though we had shown this coverage earlier in the game, I hesitate to use the word tricked, but in this instance, as the play occurred, Stroud didn't have awareness of where Kyle Hamilton was going to be and what his potential post-snap responsibility was. As an aside, I think Hamilton now has 100 tackles, 104, 106, 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery, and, oh, by the way, this interception here that pretty much capped off the night. We made it 24-2 a little bit soon thereafter. This video ended up being quite long. It took me a while today to get this accomplished and actually produced, so my apologies for it being late with the game played on Wednesday and not putting this out until late Friday night. If you enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comment section, number 1. Number 2, let me know what your perspective or thoughts are on the description that I used in the intro. If you just watched the game and didn't know that it was Christmas Day 2024, didn't know who the defensive coordinator, defensive staff was, I think you would probably agree that for the most part, it looked very much like a 2023 Ravens defense. And in fact, you can go even a little bit further. I remember the discussion, or one way to minimize how well our defense played last year was, there were so many quarterbacks who didn't play well, or so many backup quarterbacks on the schedule. You got a rookie quarterback in week 1, CJ Stroud. Well, lo and behold, we got that guy again in the division round after he had lit the league on fire for much of his rookie season, and we did the same thing to him. In 3 games against us, Stroud has 0 touchdown passes, 2 interceptions, 59% completion percentage, only 600 yards passing. There's some real consistency when you look at CJ Stroud's performance. Last year, week 1, his first NFL game, the divisional round win in Baltimore, and then this win in week 17 down in Houston. Very similar outcomes, very similar statistical production from CJ Stroud. I think that just lends some further credence to how well the Ravens are playing, number one. Do the Ravens have a good idea of how to play CJ Stroud? That's possible. He's missing Tank Dell. He's missing Stephon Diggs. I'm not willing to go that far, but I've seen that comment out on social media, and there's not really much I can say to argue against it. I think CJ Stroud is a much better quarterback than some of the other guys that we have faced since week 11. I would trust him more if he had his entire team out there. He did not. But nonetheless, if we're not willing to look at the statistical progression and patterns since week 11, how well we've played against the pass, 176.5 yards passing allowed in each game, we're just not really being honest as evaluators. The Ravens defense seems to be peaking at the right time. Let me know what you think of that thought and the plays that I used to illustrate how well Zach Orr had his guys prepared for each situation and how they were able to kind of get under C.J. Stroud's skin a little bit and take advantage of some missed opportunities that the Texans left out on the field. Appreciate you guys' time. Let me know what you think of the video in the comment section. If you think other Ravens fans might enjoy this content, this lengthy film study look at the Ravens defense and how they played as a collective in Week 17, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.